Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the sky turned black. He looked up from his newspaper and saw ships covering the sun above Detroit. They were bigger than city blocks and made no sound at all. His hands shook as he sat down. His captain reached for his phone to call his old Marine unit. The phone was dead. All phones were dead. The radio in his kitchen made only static noise. Jake ran outside and saw his neighbors standing in their yards, all looking up at the dark sky. Mrs. Chun from next door was crying. Her grandson was pulling on her dress and asking why the sun was gone. Lisa Parker was in her lab at Ford when the lights went out. She was working on new engine designs when every computer screen went blank at the same time. The backup power did not come on. She walked to the window and saw the ships hanging in the air like black clouds. Her heart started, beating fast. She had seen movies about this, but never thought it would really happen. Ben Carter was in high school math class when his teacher stopped talking and stared out the window. Ben turned to look and saw the ships. They were so big he could not see where they ended. His teacher told everyone to stay calm, but her voice was shaking. Ben thought about his parents at home and wanted to run to them. The ships stayed in the sky for 3 days. No one could make phone calls or use the internet. The government tried to send messages on old radio systems, but most people could not hear them. Then the aliens came down. They looked like tall humans, but their skin was blue, and their eyes were black all the way across. They wore white suits that seemed to glow. When they walked, they moved together like they were dancing the same dance. Jake watched them from his window and knew they were talking to each other without making sounds. The aliens put up big screens all over the city. The screens showed a blue alien with gold marks on his face. He spoke in perfect English, but his voice was flat like a machine. He said they were called Zephyrians, and they were now in charge of Earth. He said humans would work for them, and in return, they would not be killed. He said humans who fought back would die. Jake saw tanks rolling down his street, but they were not human tanks. They floated above the ground and had no wheels. When someone threw a rock at one of them, a blue light came out and turned the rock to dust. The person who threw it fell down and did not get back up. Lisa tried to drive home from work, but the roads were blocked by alien machines. She had to walk 15 miles. She saw burned cars and buildings along the way. Some people were lying in the streets and not moving. When she finally got home, her apartment building was surrounded by aliens with strange guns. They were taking people out in lines. Ben made it home from school and found his parents packing bags. His father said they had to leave the city right away. They got in the car, but only drove 2 blocks before alien ships appeared above them. Blue lights came down and their car stopped working. The aliens surrounded them and pointed their weapons. Ben's father raised his hands and told Ben to do the same. The aliens loaded them into big trucks with other families. No one was allowed to talk. If someone tried to speak, the aliens would point their weapons and make angry sounds. Ben held his mother's hand and tried not to cry. He could see his father's face was red with anger, but he was staying quiet. They drove for hours to a place outside the city where the aliens had built new buildings. The buildings were made of white metal and had no windows. There were thousands of people walking around in gray clothes. Everyone looked scared and tired. Jake was there too, and Lisa, and many other people from Detroit. Not an alien with red marks on his face stood in front of all the new people. He said humans would live here now and work in the mines below ground. He said they would dig metals that the Zephyrians needed for their ships. He said humans who worked hard would get food and a place to sleep. Humans who did not work would get nothing. Then other aliens came with small metal collars. They put 1 collar around each person's neck. The collars were cold and felt like they were buzzing. Jake tried to pull his off, but it would not move. He started to feel angry, but then the anger went away like someone had turned off a switch in his head. He felt calm and empty. Ben felt the same thing happen to him. He had been scared and angry, but now he felt nothing. His parents were next to him, but he could not feel worried about them anymore. The collar was doing something to his brain, and he knew it, but could not get upset about it. Maria Santos was a doctor from Chicago. She had been brought to the same place after her hospital was taken over. She tried to feel angry about what was happening to her patients back home, but the collar made the anger disappear. She could still think about her patients and remember caring about them, but she could not feel the caring anymore. The aliens divided everyone into groups and gave them jobs. Jake was sent to the mines with other strong men. Lisa was taken to a building where humans were forced to help fix alien machines. Ben was put with other young people to carry supplies around the camp. Maria was told to take care of sick humans in a small building that was like a hospital. On the first day of work, Jake tried to think of ways to fight back. But every time he started to feel angry or excited about fighting, the collar would make the feelings go away. He could remember being a Marine and remember his training, but he could not feel the drive to use it. He dug in the mines and felt nothing. Lisa worked on alien technology and learned how their machines worked. She could see ways to break the machines or turn them against the aliens. But when she tried to feel excited about these ideas, the collar stopped the excitement. She kept working and learning, but could not feel motivated to act. Ben tried to stay angry about his parents being prisoners. He tried to remember how much he loved them and how wrong this all was. But the collar kept washing away his feelings. He could think the thoughts, but could not feel them in his heart. He carried boxes around the camp and felt empty inside. Days turned into weeks. The humans worked and slept and ate the small meals the aliens gave them. No one tried to escape or fight because no one could feel the need to try. The collars kept them calm and obedient. The aliens walked around looking pleased with how well their system was working. But Jake noticed something strange. Late at night, when he was trying to sleep, sometimes he could feel a tiny bit of anger come back. It was small, and the collar would crush it quickly, but it was there. He started to wonder if the collar was not as perfect as the aliens thought. He could not get excited about this idea because of the collar, but he could still think about it. Lisa noticed the same thing. Deep in her mind, under where the collar could reach, she was still herself. She was still angry and still wanted to fight back. The collar controlled her feelings, but not her deepest thoughts. She kept this secret and kept learning about alien technology. The Zephyrians thought they had solved the problem of human anger. They thought their collars had made humans into perfect workers. They did not know that human rage was more than just feelings. They did not know it could hide and wait and grow stronger in the dark. 3 months had passed since the Zephyrians put collars on every human. The aliens were very happy with how well their system worked. Humans did their jobs without complaining and never tried to fight back. The work camps were quiet and productive. The aliens thought they had figured out everything about human nature. Jake Morrison worked 12 hours every day in the deep mines under the camp. His hands were rough and bleeding from digging metal ore with primitive tools. The aliens did not give humans good equipment because they said humans were not smart enough to use advanced tools safely. Jake's back hurt from bending over all day, but the collar would not let him feel angry about the pain. The mine tunnels were dark and hot. Jake worked next to other men who had been soldiers like him. He could tell by how they moved and held themselves. There was Pete Williams, who had been in the Army, and Danny Martinez, who had been in the Navy. They all recognized each other, but could not talk about fighting because the collars would sense hostile thoughts and shock them. Lisa Parker spent her days in a white building where humans were forced to help maintain alien machines. The Zephyrians brought broken equipment to the humans and made them fix it. Lisa was good with machines, and the aliens noticed this. They gave her more complex work, repairing their computers and engines. While she worked, Lisa learned how Zephyrian technology functioned. Their machines used energy in ways that human science did not understand yet. But Lisa was smart, and she started to see patterns. She memorized everything she learned and stored it in the deep parts of her mind where the collar could not reach. The aliens who supervised Lisa's work were different from the ones who guarded the mines. These aliens wore different colored marks on their faces and seemed to think they were very important. They talked to each other in their strange language while Lisa worked. She could not understand their words, but she learned to read their body language and moods. Ben Carter was assigned to carry supplies between different parts of the camp. This job let him see more of the facility than most humans. He walked through all the buildings and saw how the aliens organized everything. He noticed which areas had more guards and which areas seemed less important. Ben was only 17, but he was observant and had a good memory. The collar stopped him from feeling curious or excited about what he saw, but it could not stop him from seeing and remembering. He made mental maps of the camp and noted the daily routines of the alien guards. Sometimes Ben saw his parents during his work. They were assigned to different jobs and lived in different buildings. The aliens separated families on purpose to keep humans from forming emotional bonds that might lead to resistance. When Ben saw his parents, he wanted to run to them and hug them, but the collar made the desire fade away quickly. Maria Santos worked in the medical building, treating humans who got sick or injured at work. The aliens did not care much about human health, but they needed their workers to stay alive and productive. So they let Maria use basic medical supplies to keep humans functional. Maria noticed that some humans were getting sicker than others. The ones who had been fighters or leaders before the invasion seemed to develop more headaches and sleeping problems. She realized that the collars were working harder to suppress some people than others. The collars were not affecting everyone. The same way, she started keeping secret notes about what she observed. She could not write them down because the aliens would find them, so she memorized everything. She used medical terms and numbers that would be hard for the aliens to understand, even if they could read her thoughts that late at night in the sleeping quarters. Jake would lie on his thin mattress and feel the collar's control weaken slightly. During the day when he was working and active, the collar kept his emotions completely suppressed. But when he was still and quiet, tiny cracks would appear in the collar's control dot. In these quiet moments, Jake could feel small amounts of anger and determination returning. The feelings were weak, and the collar would crush them if they got too strong, but they were real. Jake learned to keep these feelings very small and hidden. He practiced thinking angry thoughts without letting his heart rate increase or his muscles tense up. Lisa discovered the same thing during her work with machines. When she was focused on technical problems, her mind could wander into areas the collar did not monitor as carefully. She could think about ways to sabotage the alien equipment without triggering the collar's response. She just had to keep the thoughts abstract and academic rather than emotional. Ben found that his young brain seemed more resistant to the collar than adult brains. Maybe because he was still growing, or maybe because he had not been angry for as many years as the adults. Sometimes he could push through the collar's suppression for a few seconds by concentrating very hard. It hurt his head, but he could do it. During his supply runs, Ben started making small mistakes on purpose. He would deliver boxes to the wrong buildings or forget to bring tools where they were needed. The mistakes were tiny and looked accidental, but they caused small delays and problems for the aliens. The collar did not stop him because he was not doing it from anger or rebellion, just from careful planning. Maria began to suspect that the collars were not reading human minds as completely as the aliens thought. The devices seemed to work by detecting emotional responses and suppressing them. But they could not see deeper thoughts that were not connected to immediate feelings. Humans could still think and plan and remember, as long as they stayed emotionally calm. She started testing this theory by thinking about forbidden things while keeping her heart rate steady. She thought about escaping, about fighting back, about helping other humans resist. As long as she did not let herself feel excited or angry about these thoughts, the caller did not react. Jake began to recognize other former soldiers in the mines by subtle signs. The way a man held his shoulders, or how he scanned a room when he entered it, or how he positioned himself to watch doorways. These men had military training buried inside them that the callers could not completely erase. During work breaks, Jake found ways to make brief eye contact with these men. He could not speak to them about resistance, but he could let them know. He was aware and thinking. They developed a system of tiny signals using hand positions and body, language that looked like natural gestures, but carried meaning. Lisa realized that the aliens were becoming too comfortable with human compliance. The Zephyrians who supervised her work were paying less attention and being less careful about security. They left tools and equipment unguarded that could be useful for sabotage. They discussed important information in front of humans because they assumed humans could not act on what they learned. This overconfidence was a mistake the aliens did not know they were making. They had studied human behavior, but they had only seen humans under normal conditions. They had never seen what humans could become when they were pushed to their absolute limits and then forced to adapt. Ben discovered that some of the younger humans were developing ways to communicate without the aliens noticing. They used games and songs that looked innocent but contained coded messages. The aliens saw young humans playing together and thought it was harmless, but the games were actually ways to share information about guard schedules and weak points in the camp's security. The Zephyrians measured their success by how quiet and productive the camps were. They saw humans working without complaint and assumed their callers were working perfectly. They did not understand that silence did not always mean surrender. Sometimes silence meant planning. After 3 months, the aliens were so confident in their control that they started reducing the number of guards at the camps. They moved troops to other planets where they were facing more obvious resistance. This was exactly what the humans needed, but the aliens could not see it because they had misunderstood what human rage really was. The Zephyrians thought human anger was just a simple emotion that could be turned off with technology. They did not know that human rage could transform into something much more dangerous. It could become patience, strategy, and the careful planning of revenge. It could hide in the parts of the human mind that no caller could reach, growing stronger while staying invisible. 6 months after the invasion, something was happening in the camps that the Zephyrians could not see. On the surface, everything looked normal. Humans worked their shifts, ate their small meals, and slept in their assigned quarters. The callers kept everyone calm and obedient. But underneath this peaceful appearance, a different kind of resistance was growing. Alex Rodriguez had been a special forces operative before the invasion. Now he worked in the camp's food distribution center, handing out meal portions to other humans. The aliens had given him this job because he was organized and efficient. They did not know that his real skills were in planning covert operations and building resistance networks. Alex had learned to think like a spy while wearing the collar. He could not feel excited about rebellion or angry about captivity, but he could still analyze situations and make strategic plans. During his work distributing food, he made brief contact with hundreds of humans every day. He learned who they were, what skills they had, and how they might be useful in a resistance movement. Jake Morrison had become one of Alex's key contacts in the mines. Through careful observation and subtle signals, Alex had identified Jake as a former Marine with leadership experience. They could not speak directly about resistance because the collars would detect hostile intent, but they found ways to communicate through seemingly innocent conversations about work schedules and meal times. The communication system they developed was brilliant in its simplicity. Humans would ask for extra food portions or complain about work assignments in specific ways that carried coded meanings. A request for more bread might mean I found a security weakness. A complaint about too much overtime could mean guards are changing shifts early today. Kate Williams had worked in communications before the invasion. She was assigned to clean the alien administration buildings, which gave her access to areas where the Zephyrians discussed camp operations. Kate could not understand their language, but she learned to recognize important words and phrases by watching their body language and noting which conversations made them more alert or relaxed. Kate developed a network of other cleaning staff who could observe alien activities throughout the camp. They shared information through a system based on how they arranged cleaning supplies and equipment. A mop leaning against a wall in a certain way could indicate that guards would be distracted during the next shift change. Buckets positioned in specific patterns could warn of upcoming security inspections. Lisa Parker had made the most important discovery of all. While working on alien machines, she had figured out that the collars were not just suppressing emotions. They were also broadcasting information back to Zephyrian monitoring stations. Every collar was constantly sending data about the human wearing it, including location, vital signs, and brain activity patterns. This discovery was terrifying because it meant the aliens could track individual humans at all times, but it was also useful because Lisa realized she could learn to interpret the collar signals. By watching how her own collar responded to different thoughts and activities, she began to understand exactly what the devices could and could not detect. Learned that the collars were very good at sensing immediate emotional responses like anger, fear, or excitement. But they were much less effective at monitoring complex reasoning, memory recall, or abstract planning. A human could think about technical problems, remember past experiences, or analyze logical patterns without triggering the collar's suppression. Systems. This weakness in the collar design became the foundation for the Resistance's communication methods. Humans learned to discuss rebellion using technical language, historical references, and mathematical concepts that looked harmless to the monitoring systems. A conversation about optimizing work efficiency could actually be a detailed plan. For sabotaging alien equipment, Ben Carter had become a crucial part of the information network because his supply delivery job let him move freely around the camp. He memorized messages from one group of humans and delivered them to another group by using coded gestures and seemingly accidental actions. Dropping a box in a certain way could indicate a time for a meeting. Walking a specific route could signal that guards would be distracted. Ben also discovered that the younger humans were adapting to the collars more successfully than adults. Children and teenagers seemed better able to think around the collar's limitations and find ways to feel small amounts of emotion without triggering suppression. This made them valuable as messengers and observers because they could take greater risks without being detected. Danny Hughes was 19 and had been studying computer programming before the invasion. He was assigned to help maintain the basic computer systems that the aliens used for tracking human work output. Danny could not access the advanced Zephyrian technology, but he learned how their simpler systems worked and found ways to introduce tiny errors that would compound over time. Danny's sabotage was so subtle that it looked like normal computer glitches. He would change a single digit in a database entry, or slightly modify a calculation formula, or introduce small delays in data processing. Each individual change was insignificant, but together they created increasing inefficiency in the camps. Operations. The aliens noticed that productivity was declining, but they could not identify the cause. Their monitoring systems showed that humans were working the same number of hours and maintaining the same physical effort levels. The collars indicated that human emotional states were properly suppressed. But somehow, less work was getting done and more mistakes were being made. Maria Santos had made her own important contribution to the resistance by studying the long-term effects of the collars on human psychology. She noticed that humans who had been wearing collars for several months were developing new mental patterns that the aliens had not anticipated. The most significant change was that humans were learning to separate their emotional responses from their decision-making processes. Before the collars, human actions were often driven by feelings like anger, fear, or love. But after months of emotional suppression, humans were developing the ability to make purely rational decisions based on logic and long-term planning. This was the opposite of what the Zephyrians had expected. They thought that suppressing human emotions would make humans more predictable and controllable. Instead, it was creating a generation of humans who could think with cold, calculating precision while appearing completely passive on the surface. Resistance began using this new mental discipline as a weapon. Humans learned to commit acts of sabotage while feeling absolutely nothing about them. They could lie to alien interrogators without any emotional tells that might reveal deception. They could watch fellow humans being punished without showing any reaction that might indicate solidarity or planning. Alex coordinated the resistance activities with the patience of a professional military strategist. He could not feel excitement about small victories or frustration about setbacks, but he could analyze results objectively and adjust tactics accordingly. Every successful act of sabotage provided information about alien security weaknesses. Every failure taught the resistance how to avoid similar mistakes in the future. The aliens had access to advanced surveillance technology, but they were looking for the wrong signs of rebellion. They monitored for emotional responses, sudden movements, and aggressive behavior. They did not think to watch for the subtle patterns of coordinated inefficiency that the humans were creating. Jake's mining crew began making their quotas with mathematical precision, hitting exactly the minimum required output every single day. This looked like good compliance to the aliens, but it was actually carefully planned under production. The humans could have mined much more ore, but they were deliberately working at the slowest pace that would not trigger punishment. Lisa started introducing minor design flaws into the alien equipment she repaired. The machines would work perfectly for several weeks, then develop problems that required more repairs. The aliens thought this was normal wear and tear, but Lisa was systematically reducing the lifespan of their technology. After 6 months, the resistance had achieved something remarkable. They had created a network of coordinated sabotage and information sharing that spanned the entire camp while remaining completely invisible to their captors. The Zephyrians still believed their collar system was working perfectly, but they were actually losing control of their human workers a little more every day. The humans had learned the most important lesson of underground resistance, that the best rebellion is the one your enemy cannot see. They were not fighting the aliens with weapons or violence. Instead, they were using patience, intelligence, and careful coordination to slowly undermine Zephyrian control from within. Most importantly, the humans had discovered that their rage had not been destroyed by the collars. It had been transformed into something much more dangerous than the aliens had ever imagined. It had become a cold, focused determination that could hide behind any mask and wait for the perfect moment to strike. 1 year after the invasion, Lisa Parker made the discovery that would change everything. She was working alone in the technology repair facility late at night, fixing a damaged Zephyrian communication device. The aliens trusted her with complex equipment now because she had proven to be skilled and obedient. They had no idea she was actually studying their technology to find weaknesses. as Lisa worked on the communication device. She noticed something strange about its energy patterns. The device was designed to interface with the neural collars that all humans wore. But the connection was not as stable as the aliens believed. Lisa realized that if she could generate the right kind of electromagnetic pulse at precisely the right frequency, she could temporarily overload a collar's suppression systems. Lisa tested her theory very carefully. She used spare parts to build a small device that could produce the electromagnetic pulse she needed. When she was certain no aliens were watching, she pointed the device at her own collar and activated it for just a fraction of a second. The result was incredible. For about 10 seconds, Lisa felt her real emotions return. She felt anger at her, captivity, love for her fellow humans, and fierce determination to fight back. The feelings were so strong after months of suppression that they almost overwhelmed her. Then the collar reset itself, and the emotions faded away. But Lisa knew she had found the key to freedom. Lisa shared her discovery with Alex Rodriguez through their established communication network. Alex understood immediately that this breakthrough could be the foundation for a coordinated uprising. But he also knew they would need to be extremely careful. If they freed too many people too quickly, the aliens would detect the problem and strengthen their security measures. Alex began planning what he privately called Operation Prometheus. The plan was to gradually free key resistance members from their collars, build up a core group of fully emotional humans, and then launch a coordinated strike against alien facilities across the entire camp. But first, they needed to test Lisa's collar-breaking technique on other people. Ben Carter volunteered to be the first test subject. His young brain had already shown more resistance to the collar than most adults, and the resistance needed to know if Lisa's device would work on different types of people. Ben met Lisa in a storage room. During a shift change when the area would be empty, Lisa activated her device, and Ben's collar overloaded for 12 seconds. The experience was overwhelming for him. After a year of emotional suppression, feeling, his full range of emotions return was like being struck by lightning. Ben felt rage at what had been done to his parents, love for his fellow humans, and a burning desire to fight back against the aliens. When the collar reset, he was changed. Forever. Even though Ben's emotions were suppressed again, he retained the memory of feeling them fully. This memory became a source of strength that helped him resist the collar's control more effectively. He began to develop techniques for briefly pushing through the suppression without needing Lisa's device. It was painful and exhausting, but he could do it for a few seconds at a time. Maria Santos was the next person to experience collar breaking. As the camp's medical officer, she needed to be able to make clear decisions about human welfare without emotional suppression interfering with her judgment. When Lisa freed her collar temporarily, Maria felt compassion and protective anger that had been buried for a year. She understood that these emotions were not weaknesses to be suppressed, but strengths that made her a better healer. Jake Morrison's collar breaking was different from the others. When his suppression lifted, he did not just feel anger or determination. He felt the presence of every other human in the camp, as if they were part of his own extended family. The military training that had been buried under collar suppression came flooding back, but it was enhanced by a deep emotional connection to the people. He was fighting to protect. Jake realized that this connection between humans was something the Zephyrians had never understood. The aliens were telepathic and communicated with each other through shared thoughts, but their telepathy was based on dominance and hierarchy. Human emotional connections were based on mutual support and shared sacrifice. These were completely different ways of thinking, and the aliens had never learned to recognize or counter human emotional bonds. Danny Hughes discovered that collar breaking had an unexpected effect on his technical abilities. When his emotions returned, his creativity and problem-solving skills increased dramatically. He realized that the collars had not just been suppressing feelings, they had been limiting human intellectual potential. Emotions and intelligence were connected in ways the aliens did not understand. With his enhanced abilities, Danny began developing more sophisticated methods of technological sabotage. He created programs that could spread through Zephyrian computer networks like viruses, causing system failures that looked like random malfunctions. He also found ways to intercept alien communications and learn about their plans in advance. Kate Williams used her temporary freedom from collar suppression to enhance the Resistance communication network. With her emotions restored, she could think more creatively about information sharing and develop more complex codes. She established contact with resistance groups in other camps and learned that similar movements were developing all over the world. The global nature of human resistance became clear as the freed humans shared information across camps. Humans in every facility were independently developing similar tactics of subtle sabotage and hidden coordination. This was not a coincidence. It was evidence that human resistance was an instinctive response that emerged naturally whenever humans were oppressed, regardless of the specific circumstances. Alex used his periods of collar freedom to coordinate these global resistance efforts. He learned that the timing was crucial. All the camps would need to launch their uprisings simultaneously to prevent the aliens from responding to early rebellions by strengthening security at other facilities. This required precise communication and careful planning across thousands of miles and dozens of camps. The resistance discovered that collar breaking had cumulative effects. Each time a person's collar was overloaded, they retained more emotional memory and developed greater resistance to suppression. After several collar-breaking sessions, some humans could access their emotions for minutes at a time without external help. Ben Carter became so resistant that he could stay emotionally active for almost an hour before his collar reasserted control. Lisa realized that the collars were not just individual devices. They were part of a networked system that the aliens used to monitor and control human behavior across all their facilities. This gave her an idea for a devastating attack. If she could overload enough collars simultaneously, the feedback through the network might damage the aliens' entire human control system. The aliens began to notice that something was wrong, but they could not identify the problem. Productivity continued to decline despite their monitoring systems showing normal human compliance. Equipment failures were increasing even though humans appeared to be maintaining the machines properly. Small acts of defiance were becoming more common, but the perpetrators were never caught. Most disturbing to the Zephyrians was that some humans were beginning to show signs of coordinated behavior that should have been impossible under collar suppression. Groups of workers would sometimes move or act in ways that suggested they were communicating with each other, but their collars showed no evidence of emotional bonding or shared planning. The aliens increased security measures and conducted more frequent inspections, but these efforts were ineffective because they were looking for the wrong kind of resistance. The Zephyrians expected human rebellion to be emotional, violent, and obvious. They were not prepared for a resistance movement based on patient intelligence, careful coordination, and hidden emotional connections. Ben Carter made the most important discovery during one of his extended periods of collar resistance. He realized that when humans experienced strong emotions together, especially emotions focused on protecting each other, they created a kind of shared mental energy that the aliens could not detect or understand. This energy was not telepathic like Zephyrian communication, but it was real, and it could be used as a weapon. When Ben shared this discovery with the other freed humans, they began experimenting with coordinated emotional experiences. Groups of resistance members would use Lisa's device to break their collars simultaneously and focus their restored emotions on shared goals. The effect was powerful enough that even humans whose collars were still active could feel it as a subtle influence that helped them resist. Suppression. The resistance realized they had discovered something that could turn the aliens' greatest advantage against them. Zephyrian telepathy made them formidable in combat because they could coordinate their actions perfectly. But human emotional bonding, when properly focused, could create a psychological force that overwhelmed telepathic defenses and left the aliens confused and vulnerable. 18 months after the invasion, the moment of reckoning had arrived. Alex Rodriguez stood in the storage room that had become the Resistance's secret command center, looking at the faces of the core team that would lead Operation Prometheus. Lisa Parker held the improved collar-breaking device she had spent months perfecting. Jake Morrison carried himself with the quiet confidence of a soldier preparing for battle. Ben Carter, now 19 and seasoned by months of resistance work, radiated a determination that seemed far older than his years. The plan was elegant in its simplicity, but devastating in its scope. At exactly midnight, resistance cells in 47 camps across 6 continents would simultaneously activate their collar-breaking devices. The electromagnetic pulses would overload not just individual collars, but would send feedback through the entire Zephyrian control network. While the aliens dealt with system failures, freed humans would launch coordinated attacks on key facilities using improvised weapons and captured alien technology. But the real weapon was not technology or tactics. It was the accumulated rage of millions of humans who had spent 18 months learning to hide their fury while planning their revenge. Lisa activated her device first, sending a pulse through the collars of 30 resistance leaders gathered in different parts of the camp. The effect was immediate and profound. After months of suppression, their emotions returned like a dam bursting. But these were not the wild, uncontrolled emotions the aliens expected from humans. These were feelings that had been refined and focused by months of careful planning and shared purpose. Jake felt the change flow through him like electricity. His anger at captivity combined with his love for fellow humans and his military training to create something the aliens had never encountered. This was not the simple rage they had studied and learned to suppress. This was strategic fury, patient, and intelligent, and absolutely committed to victory. Ben Carter's collar broke, and he immediately felt the presence of every other human in the camp, as if they were extensions of his own family. The protective instincts that had been building for months exploded into full awareness. He could sense the fear and hope of humans throughout the facility, and he knew that their freedom depended on the next few hours. Maria Santos felt her suppressed compassion return as a burning need to heal not just individual humans, but humanity itself. Her medical training combined with fierce protective love to create an unshakable determination to end human suffering under alien rule. She knew that tonight she would either help free her people or die trying. As the core team's collars failed, something unexpected happened. The shared emotional energy that Ben had discovered began to spread beyond the resistance leaders. Humans throughout the camp whose collars were still active began to feel a subtle influence, a whisper of hope and determination that helped them push against their own suppression. The aliens' control network was experiencing something it was never designed to handle: coordinated human emotional resonance. Danny Hughes felt his technical creativity explode as his collar failed. With his emotions restored, he could see solutions to problems that had seemed impossible under suppression. He activated the computer viruses he had been secretly installing in alien systems for months. Across the camp, Zephyrian equipment began experiencing cascading failures that looked random, but were actually precisely timed to create maximum confusion. Kate Williams used her freed communication skills to send the final coordination signals to resistance cells around the world. Through hidden radio transmitters that humans had built from salvaged parts, she broadcast the simple message that would trigger global rebellion: the sun is rising. Within minutes, Similar messages were spreading through every camp on Earth. The aliens noticed the system failures immediately, but they responded in exactly the wrong way. Their telepathic coordination, which had been their greatest strength during the invasion, became a weakness when they were hit by something they could not understand. As human emotional energy spread through the camps, it created a kind of psychological static that interfered with Zephyrian mental communication. Commander Zethka, the blue-skinned alien who led the Earth occupation, felt the disruption in his telepathic network like a sharp pain in his mind. His subordinates were reporting equipment failures, communication breakdowns, and strange behavioral changes among the human workers. But when he tried to telepathically coordinate a response, he found his thoughts scattered and confused. Source of the confusion was human rage, but not the kind of rage the Zephyrians had studied. This was collective fury that had been compressed and refined under 18 months of oppression. When it was finally released, it created a psychological shockwave that the aliens' telepathic minds could not process or defend against. Jake Morrison led the first physical assault on the camp's main control center. The guards were Zephyrian, soldiers who had fought in dozens of interplanetary wars, but they had never faced opponents like these freed humans. Jake and his team moved with perfect coordination, not because they were telepathic, but because they shared an emotional bond that guided their actions instinctively. The aliens fired their energy weapons, but the humans had spent months studying Zephyrian combat tactics and preparing countermeasures. They used mirrors salvaged from bathroom fixtures to reflect energy beams back at their attackers. They threw handfuls of metal shavings from the mining operations to disrupt the aliens' electronic targeting systems. Most importantly, they fought with a desperate creativity that the aliens could not predict or counter. Lisa Parker led a team to the technology center where she had learned so much about alien systems. Now she put that knowledge to use systematically, destroying key equipment while downloading important data onto hidden human-built storage devices. The aliens had never imagined that their compliant human workers were actually learning to use their own technology against them. Ben Carter moved through the camp like a messenger of liberation, using Lisa's collar-breaking device to free humans in strategic locations. Each newly freed human became a source of emotional energy that strengthened the growing wave of resistance. The psychological effect spread faster than the aliens could respond to it. As more callers failed, the feedback through the Zephyrian control network intensified. In the aliens' monitoring stations, screens filled with error messages and system warnings. The devices that had seemed so reliable for 18 months were suddenly failing in ways the aliens had never anticipated. But the real problem was not technical failure. It was that the aliens were experiencing human rage as a direct assault on their telepathic consciousness. Maria Santos led teams of freed humans to the other camp's sections, breaking down the barriers that had kept human families and communities separated. Parents reunited with children they had not been allowed to see for months. Friends found each other after being deliberately isolated. These emotional reunions created surges of shared feeling that further damaged the aliens' ability to think clearly. The uprising spread beyond the camps as signals from the resistance reached humans who had been working in alien cities and installations. Factory workers began sabotaging production lines. Technicians introduced errors into critical systems. Even humans who could not break their collars completely began to resist in small ways that added up to massive disruption. Commander Zethka tried to organize a counterattack, but his telepathic commands were being scrambled by the human emotional energy now flooding through the camp. His soldiers could barely understand his orders, and when they tried to respond, their own thoughts became confused and scattered. The aliens were experiencing something their species had never encountered, a form of psychological warfare that turned their greatest strength into a crippling weakness. Danny Hughes succeeded in crashing the central computer system that controlled collar functions throughout the entire facility. Suddenly, thousands of collars began failing simultaneously. As their control signals disappeared, the electromagnetic feedback created by so many collar failures at once sent a pulse to the Zephyrian network that damaged monitoring equipment on their ships orbiting Earth. The aliens tried to retreat to their heavily defended command centers, but they found that their security systems had been compromised by months of subtle sabotage. Doors would not lock properly. Surveillance cameras had been redirected to show empty corridors. Communication systems carried false information that led alien reinforcements to the wrong locations. Jake Morrison's team reached the main alien command center and found Commander Zethka and his senior officers huddled around their control panels, trying desperately to re-establish communication with their forces. The aliens looked up at the approaching humans with expressions of confusion and fear. For the first time since the invasion, the Zephyrians were the ones who felt helpless and overwhelmed. Jake could have killed the alien commander easily, but instead he chose to do something that would have been impossible under Collar's oppression. He felt compassion for a defeated enemy. Jake offered the aliens a choice: immediate evacuation from Earth or destruction of their remaining forces by the human uprising that was now spreading across the entire planet.